Hey guys, it's Marina with Artworthy Life, where I teach Christ-centered art journaling that gets you into God's Word every day. Happy Friday, everybody. I am slightly delayed today. I was just having some technical difficulties, but I made it finally. I do want to go ahead and start with a scripture reading because that's the best way to start the day, right? Get into the Word of God. So I'm going to go to a verse that I've probably read before. It's such a pretty beautiful analogy, or I shouldn't say analogy, but just a great point that Jesus makes. And it's in Luke chapter 12, verse 27. And here's what it says. Oops, there it is. Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? I just love that because it's so beautiful to think that, we can just go out into the garden and we see all these super elaborate flowers, even just a daisy. I was sitting out in our backyard last summer, I think it was, and I picked up a little white daisy flower, whatever, the little just simple wildflower ones. And I'm like picking it apart. I picked off all of the little petals of it, and then like took apart the yellow in the center, and then took apart the green where it connects to the center, and all of that. And I just am like dissecting this flower going, this is amazing. Like it's this like simple little flower that we run over with the lawnmower and don't even think about. And I'm like, this tiny little flower is still super, super elaborate and has all this detail. And yet God says that he's going to take better care of us than he does of that flower. And he clothes the flowers and makes them more beautiful than Solomon. So what do we have to worry about? It's like, wow. And granted, it's not like life always is perfect, especially, there's a lot of messages out there trying to say, well, when you become a Christian, everything is flowery and beautiful. And that's not true. Like it doesn't solve all of your problems. However, it gives you hope for eternity that you have a place in heaven. So it's just wonderful. Oh, hi, buenos dias. Hey, Leslie Ann, how are you? I'm so glad to see everybody on today. I do see like a couple more people. So if you haven't said hi, feel free to say hello. And I'm not sure if StreamYard will let me see your name unless you click the thing. So I'm not sure. It should let me see your comment and your name. But with this double screen thing, sometimes it doesn't let me see your name right away. So if it asks you to do something, do whatever it asks. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on today's journal page. I did want to tape off the edges before I get started. So a lot of times I show you guys how to tape the edge on your journal pages because it makes them look really finished at the end of the day. So if you haven't been watching for the last couple of weeks, you might have missed this theme we have going. We have quite a few really sweet pages along the theme of like nature and bugs and bees. So here was the first page for May, just a really sweet page with a little hexagon as like a nod to honeybees. And then this one was the butterfly. If you have missed any of these and you really want to see them, you can always go back and watch the replay. And just leave a comment and say #replay or something so I know that you are watching after the fact. Leslie Ann says she's only had to do that once. Oh, okay. So you had to allow it. That's good. Hey, Miss Leslie. Oh, I love all the flowers. That's so fun. So I did the butterfly. And then we did this bee with the wing. So that was kind of fun. That's when I couldn't get the date right, and I had to keep blacking it out and finding a way to get the date right. It was terrible. Okay, then the honeycomb. And this one I actually did within my group. So if you're not aware that I have a journal club, an art journaling club, this is some of the stuff we do in the group. So that was actually in the group. I also did this jar that says hope, which has been our word for a while. And then this fun page also was in the group. We did some hexagons cut out from some of our paper. This is some of the paper that comes in the Happy Mail that I mail out to our group members. So it was just a really fun page. But check this out. This border is what we're about to create with our masking tape. So see how that just makes the page look really finished rather than painting all the way up to the edge, giving it that like crisp white border is really, really fun. Here's another page we did. This one was more simple, but it was fun because we cut out the little pieces of paper. So just a few things that you might have missed. And so today I thought, since we've already done bees and we've already done butterflies, and I'm running out of little bugs that would go well with this theme, I thought we would do some sunflowers today. So I'm going to take this off. And is anybody's favorite flower sunflower? I think I did sunflowers live one time before, and I was surprised how many people really like sunflowers. They're so happy looking, really happy. I was just up visiting some friends of mine that live south of town up in the hills, and they have a brand new garden. I was so excited to see it. They're really getting into gardening lately, and they have planted all these wonderful foods that are going to be, they're going to be able to harvest later this summer, but they also have like flowers around the edge to make it pretty. And one of the flowers is going to be a sunflower, but it was planted by the birds that are eating out of their bird feeders. So right underneath the bird feeders, this little sunflower was growing. And so once it got, up a little bit where they could grab it, they put it into their garden, which I think is so cool. And they said there's another one growing too. So it's like a little volunteer sunflower, which is really fun. And I think where they've planted it, it might get pretty big. It would be really cool to have a wall of sunflowers. So does anybody love sunflowers or have them growing in their garden right now? That would be really cool. So I have a reference photo for this sunflower. I'm not sure if you guys should tell me if you can see the tracing that I've done already. I don't always use a reference photo and I don't always trace, but if I want to save myself some time, I just take my page, the page itself, and lay it over a screen and very lightly trace the image. You can also print a page and use carbon paper, but that saves me like a couple of extra steps and it gives me the basic shape of something if I'm wanting to go a little quicker. So I really like to do that. So I have my set of watercolor paints here called Kuretake. Let me make sure you guys can see. I have to kind of switch back between screens. Okay. I hope you guys are still being able to see that. Okay. So this is the brand name, and I have the names written here, but I'm going to tell you the exact name they say. I just feel like sometimes that's not exactly what I would call that. So basically I'm using lemon yellow, but it feels very warm and sunny. So it's more of a warm yellow. And I'm going to put some color down on these flower petals. And with watercolor, for the most part, you want to start with light and move darker. So you don't want to start with your darkest colors, because if you start to add layers after that, it doesn't build like acrylic does. So you could potentially accidentally reactivate those colors. So for example, if you know that your painting is going to have some black somewhere on it and you paint that first, well, once it dries, it is dry, but if you add water to it, it reactivates. So the bad part about that is if you run a paintbrush right up to a black edge, like if I were to paint the inside of this black or brown, and then I took my yellow and came right up to it, it could make the black bleed into the yellow, which you don't want to happen. So it's better to go from yellow and then go darker, darker, darker to your blacks and stuff. And that's going to make your colors not bleed so much. And if black bleeds onto yellow, like it doesn't bleed as much. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. I know that's a little confusing. So it doesn't build like acrylic does, and some people don't like it because of that, but I actually really like the look of watercolor. So I think it's worth whatever you have to kind of fiddle with in order to make it work. I think it's really, really soft looking and beautiful. So I'm adding all of the yellow into this flower to start with, but while it's still wet, I'm going to get a little bit of red and darken up my color. Let me make sure you guys can see my palette. I don't think you can see my palette yet. Okay. So this is my egg tray palette. Leslie Ann says she's going to catch the rest later. June should be better. Okay, yes, God bless you, Leslie Ann, and please know that our prayers are with you. Have a blessed day. So we're going to get a darker orange here, and then I'm going to touch the inside of these petals. I do have a reference photo, like I said, but I'm not going super based on it. I mainly used it to get the basic shape of the petals, and now I'm just kind of winging it. I don't need the flower to be perfect. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of orange and pulling it out onto the edges. This is going to be more abstract than some of my paintings are. And I'm just adding enough on the edge to darken the center of it, and then using the tip of this brush to pull out toward the ends of the petals. This is a size 16 round, and I could switch brushes to a smaller brush, but the tip of this is so fine that I can just kind of keep going with this if I want to. But if you are following along, you can definitely switch brushes if you want to. Once you learn to use the pressure of a brush, though, and not press too hard, you can use one brush for almost an entire painting. It's really fun. One thing I would really like to do that I've kind of dabbled in but haven't really done for reals is Japanese painting with the actual Japanese brushes, because they have a really good like a texture that holds the water in a certain way on the very tip of the brush. And they are like experts at one brush painting, like one brush and you get the whole painting done. It's amazing. So, and then they can also do their calligraphy with the same paintbrush. It's amazing. So I would love to take an actual class on, specifically how to accomplish that, even though I've kind of figured it out in different ways for certain looks I was going for. But I would love to just, sit down and actually learn that part. It's really fun. You're always improving. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this other flower. I have two flowers going on here. And same thing, I'm just going to start at the center where the petals touch the center of the flower and pull out and create these little petal shapes. They're all very loose, and there's layers of them. So what I'm doing, and I'm not sure if you can tell, let me see if I can get a little closer. Come a little closer. Is I am putting a little tiny bit of white space between each petal. So if there's two petals here, I'm painting the petal and then leaving a tiny little gap and painting another petal. And for a loose kind of almost abstract painting, that helps your eye see the shapes without you having to draw a line. So just leaving some white space. This one's ending up a little brighter than I want. So I'm going to dry my brush off and soak up some of this yellow because it's a little deeper than I want it to be. And then I'm also basically being bad at coloring in the lines. I'm leaving little gaps behind on the petals themselves. So when that dries, what that does is it makes the painting look looser and more airy, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to say that. It doesn't look stuffy or perfectly colored in. So if you kind of are not used to doing paintings that look imperfect or slightly abstract, just think about it as like, okay, I'm going to color in this petal, but I'm going to be bad at it. So I'm going to color it in and kind of skip my brush around so the edges are good, but there's little white gaps here and there. And I'm always saying, leave some white space, because when you're first starting off with watercolor, that's like the main problem most people have, is remembering to leave some white space, because unlike acrylic, you can't go back and add it in. At least not easily. There's a little bit you can do, like lifting color and stuff like that, but it's really not the best method. The best method is to think about it ahead of time and leave some space there. Okay, now I'm adding back some orange. This is a little darker than I want it, so I'm trying to sweep that up. So I'm adding a little bit of red. I have the number 32 red. This is called red in this palette. And I'm mixing it with yellow here. Let's see, do I see any more comments? Oh, and did anybody say that sunflowers are their favorite? I'm just watching for comments. Okay, and then I'm adding that into each little petal while they're wet. This is called wet on wet. And what that does is, rather than creating a brush stroke, like if you take a wet brush on a dry paper and you just paint, it creates a brush stroke. But if your paper is already wet and you touch it with wet paint, which is what I have on my brush, that is like putting a drop of ink into a puddle, and it's just going to spread out onto that puddle. So it makes the colors blend a little bit more, and it kind of creates these little mottled puddles and unpredictable shades and what they call tide lines and different things like that that are really fun and that make things look uniquely watercolor. So that's one of the things I like to do. You don't always have to do that. In fact, you can paint an entire painting with watercolor as if it were acrylic. You just wait for your layers to dry and then paint some stuff. You can't build it like you can acrylic, but you can do just like perfect brush strokes and have everything like very precise, exactly where you want it. But having the color just kind of bleed out all over the page and do what it wants to do and not necessarily making it absolutely perfect is one of the things that makes watercolor fun. So it's like that balance between absolutely perfect and a little bit unpredictable, which is really fun. Okay, so this needs to dry just a little bit. So I'm going to work on the background, and most of the palette, most of the pages I've done this month have a certain sort of warm browns, and it's almost like fall colors. I thought about that when I started to do it. It's very much like yellows and mustard and gray browns and like sagey green type colors, black and white. So I'm going to keep going with that color scheme. But for this background, I'm going to do sort of a gray-green color. So I'm going to use my palette over here. I actually have some green still on this palette. I guess I'll kind of clean that off a little bit and grab some of my number 54. This is called olive green, which is one of the colors in this palette that I think they got right when they named it. It's more of an olive green. It's deep and like leaning toward army green. So I'm going to grab that and add a bunch of water to it. So I'm just putting a little bit here and adding a ton of water because I'm going to create a background that utilizes our nice fun border that we just made and makes that worth it. So whenever you do a border like this, like remember to actually use it. If you don't put anything up against the edge, you won't see that nice crisp little border you've just made. So I'm going to make it kind of, I just had an idea. Before I do that, I'm going to put a little section for my journaling. This is my art journal, and I always have scripture and sometimes a to-do list and always some art and maybe some prayers written down in my journal. So I'm going to leave a little section for that, for some of that in here. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my masking tape and I'm just going to make a little section. I'm tearing the edge because I really like a torn edge. I figured that out a little while ago that I like a torn edge on my masked off areas. It makes the painting less stiff, and also, like, just a practical reason, it makes it less concerning if your little masked off area isn't perfectly level, because you kind of have this uneven edge anyway, so it's not that big a deal. So I'm taking a piece of tape and I'm carefully tearing off the edge of it so that it can make a little square. And by the way, guys, I normally put a supply list out a little bit earlier in the day so that you guys can grab your supplies. And I did not do that today, so I apologize for that. But I normally do that. But if you don't see that post from me, normally what I'm using is my watercolor supplies and some masking tape. And then I typically need a micron pen and some pencils. So that's what you will normally see me using on here. Okay, so I'm going to tear this edge. It's a little tedious, but it really makes this fun little rough edge like that. Okay. One thing I don't love is blue masking tape. I'm using it right now. It works wonderfully, but it messes with my head when I have this dark blue happening and then I'm painting all these lovely, gorgeous colors. And it's like, I don't know, it's not, it's hard to see the color palette as you're going. Okay, so see that little patch of tape there? That's going to be like a journaling area, or we'll use it to frame in maybe the verse or something like that. So that's a really fun way to mix up the background. Or if you are using your journal as an art journal, meaning you write in it as well as do art, it's good to have a little section to put things in. That really helps, and it keeps you from having to just write in the sky, like in the background. So this is my olive green that I mixed up earlier. I'm adding a little bit of water to it, and then I'm going to pull this over onto here. So I'm using a big brush and doing big sweeping motions, and I'm just going to go across the whole page with this sage green color. Now, the effect that I want to get is I don't want a perfect smooth background. A lot of people like a perfectly smooth background. Go for it if you love it. But I want some dark shades over here, and I want some lighter shades, and I want the colors to vary. So I'm going to take my brush and sweep some really light green on there. But then I'm coming back with a darker shade of green, meaning I grab more pigment off my palette and then touch the wet area. So wet on wet again, and see how that starts to bleed out into the rest. I can just take my brush and push that around. And that'll make the background unpredictable. It'll make it more interesting. You won't just have a perfect smooth green background. Now I'm going to take this green and just gently, carefully go around the flowers. I'm leaving a white space between the background and the flowers. I don't actually want the flower to touch the background. Sometimes I do, but I like that little halo effect of doing just a really thin gap between the flower and the background. That'll make the flowers stand out a little bit more, and won't let the colors bleed as much. This one bled out into it a little bit, which kind of looks cool, so I'm going to leave it. So if that happens, like, it's not the end of the world. This is a type of painting that is actually kind of fun if you mess up a little, because then you're like, oh, look what happened. Okay, so here I got a little bit of orange onto my paintbrush, and it came out onto the background. That's actually kind of cool. I think I'm going to touch this to see if it bleeds out. Okay, that's bleeding out a little bit, which is cool. It makes it's, I don't know, it's less stuffy. There is an art to abstract. I'm not an expert at it, but I like to just play with it to see what colors are going to mix together and how the mistakes are going to turn into something pretty. So no true mistakes in this kind of a style. I'm also going to bring the green around the back side of these flowers. We are going to do some leaves down here in a little while, but I want to put the green back here so those leaves have somewhere to live once they get here. And that's about all that needs. This is getting really modeled and like a lot of, hey, Tanya, I'm so excited to see you. How are you? So the background is getting really kind of blotchy and a lot of little tide lines kind of feathering out into the edge. And that's okay. Like, if you don't like that, you can use a lot less water and just gently smooth the color across. But if you are okay with that, you can get a lot of really fun things happening on the background that you can't, well, it's very difficult to make it happen. It's better to just let the watercolor do its job and like go for it. I'm adding a little bit more dark here because this top edge is really dark and I want the bottom to balance out. So I'm adding more dark in this corner over here, and that should help that out a little bit. I'm using a lot of water to push this stuff around because I don't want anywhere to look like way too smooth. So see how that creates, like, I don't know, it's like this little soft, fogged out background. I don't know. Okay, so that's what you're going for. My flowers are almost dry. Look how it's bleeding out right here. That just looks really cool. The yellow going into the green like that, and here it's doing that too. Watercolor does this on its own. That's what makes me excited about watercolor. Aw, that's so great, Tanya. You're so sweet. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna look at my reference photo really quick. Sunflower. And there are some darker shadows on it that I want to add in before I do my black. So I'm going to grab some of that orange again, and still using the same brush because I'm terrible at switching brushes if I don't have to. I just keep going. So same size 16 round. I'm grabbing a little bit of the red that I used to make that orange color, grabbing more of the yellow that I already had. And I'm going to try to create, you can see the color I'm making right here. I'm going to try to create an orange and then add some dark brown to it. So this is, oh, it is called dark brown. So this is a number 47 if you're following along with the same palette. And I know a lot of you guys have this palette, so let me know if you do. I always like to know who's actually working off of the same palette as me. Okay, and the only thing I want to be careful with is right now I'm not working wet on wet, so it's not going to blend as well as the initial layers did. So I'm going to actually be more careful about my brush strokes and making them something I actually want to see. This one is wet on wet because that little petal hasn't quite dried yet. But I'm just going to be real careful about these little brush strokes, making sure they are actually where I want them to be. Whereas the wet on wet, you can almost just touch it and leave it and let it flow. Okay, so a little bit more over here. And I'm also, if you notice, going from the center of the flower again and pulling up toward the outside of the petals, because if I don't do that, my brush strokes are going to be all weird directions, and that could be kind of strange looking. So I'm not sure what you would call this color. It's like a deep, almost like a chestnut color, but it is enough of a dark shade that I can emphasize the little petals here and get the shape of the sunflower across without actually outlining every single petal. So see how that creates like a little burst like from the center? Kind of like that. I don't know that we've ever grown sunflowers ourselves. We moved a lot growing up, like a ton. And so gardens were sort of like something we aspired to, but never really could actually accomplish. So it was kind of hard to actually get anything planted. Although now, knowing more that I know now, I know we maybe could have. I didn't have the mindset of like, oh, things grow fast. I just didn't know how fast things grew because I moved so much. In fact, when we moved here, our trees in the backyard were really small, and my dad kept saying, the trees have gotten so big, and I'm like, no, they haven't. Like they're probably just a tiny bit bigger. And I finally looked back because we've been here 7 years, since 2013. So we've been here like going on 8 years. And yeah, it's like they've grown a ton. And I was like, whoa, even the trunk, like I'm looking at the trunk of the tree thinking, how does it even grow that much in that amount of time? I had no idea trees grow that fast. Just never thought of investing the time in ever planting a tree because we moved on average, when you average the moves, every 6 months. So I moved 23 times before I turned 17 and was like, okay, I'm just not going to plant, because you don't think about planting when you're not even sure if you're going to be there to see the crop. So yeah, trees were definitely not an option at all. They just seemed really unreasonably, they would like an unreasonable investment to make when you're going to move again, which is probably true. But now I know they actually grow faster than I thought they did. And I didn't know that till we moved here. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I grabbed a dark brown and a little bit of black that was still on my palette. Let me see if you guys can see my colors over here. So this is the color I'm using, this kind of blackish brown. A lot of times I'm using color that's still on the palette, and that's one of the great things about watercolor if you're into like reusing or trying not to waste art supplies. Watercolor is a great option because almost everything on my palette I can just keep reactivating and keep reactivating because it's still usable. So I'm taking that and just touching it onto the center of these flowers. And I'm doing this really like shaky hand, like this, like almost like, oh, like you're really nervous. And that makes this kind of bumpy, sporadic texture. And I really like to do that because if you just sweep the color on, it doesn't look natural. I'm also going to clean this off because this is a little dark for the whole center. So I'm going to add some number 46 brown, and this is actually more of a chestnut brown color, like even more so. And I'm going to mix it with the brown I just made so that it doesn't clash too much, and add that in to it. Whoops, that's kind of dark. In order to get less pigment, I just dried off my brush. I'm going to actually clean it, dry it off, and pick that up again. If you have too much pigment on your brush, it just goes bleh, down onto the painting, and it doesn't sit well. It just doesn't sit well with the painting. Okay, and I'm mixing these two colors, and that makes me a little happier because it's not like super harsh, dark, blackish brown. I don't really like that color as much. Okay, and then I'm going to bring that all the way across the sunflower center there, and grab a little bit more of that reddish color and touch it into there. So basically I'm making sure this center is not totally black. That's what I'm going for. Another thing that I've done is I haven't painted the whole center in. See all that white space I'm leaving? Just because this style of painting is not going to do as well with a full solid center. It's going to be better with little bits of white left behind. And I don't know, you can ask a professional artist what that means, but basically it just looks better. I don't know, I figured out it looks better with a little bit of white left behind. You don't have to be perfect. You could just like go with whatever looks nice. I'm going to come back to this dark green that we were using earlier. This is this, I almost said sage. Looks kind of like sage. It's olive green, and I'm getting a lot thicker pigment. So a lot of you guys ask, how do I get the pigment to come out not too watery, not too thick? And what I'm doing is I added just a touch of water into the palette here. And then I'm going like this. I'll show you. I'm going from here to here, 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 and going back and forth. And what I'm doing is I'm picking up more and more pigment off of the watercolor cake right here, pulling it into here, and it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker because I'm not adding any more water. So the color I'm getting is a lot stronger pigment. Let me show you how thick that color is. Oops. So here's the color that you're getting. Really dark color. Instead of adding water, which if I add too much water to this palette right here, I could do it right here. Just put a little green down and then add water. So I'm going to the jar, dipping and adding water and adding water. And I'm not going and getting any more pigment. Well, that's obviously just going to water the color down, and that's going to come off much lighter. Look at that. Okay, so I hope that helps. Does that help you guys understand how to get a thicker color? It's all about practice to know how to get the right amount on your brush. And I will say, once I mix it up, oftentimes I clean my brush off because you've got all this color on the brush that you just loaded up. You don't want to go straight to your painting with that because you're going to get all of this just really rich color. Don't necessarily need that. So I'm getting kind of a thick color, but I'm actually grabbing a little bit of the water from over here because I don't want it super thick. So just a little bit on my brush. And I'm going to use this for these leaves over here. I may actually want to go a little darker, but we'll see. So I'm going to paint in some leaves. These are going to be really simple, nothing special, just a leaf shape. And I think I may do even a couple of layers on this. I'm going to water down my brush a little and just pull some of this color around like that. So I'm purposefully not coloring that in perfectly, leaving some little bits of space and white there. And then I'm going to do another little leaf down here, down underneath the sunflower here. And one thing you want to be aware of is that when you're painting a leaf underneath a petal, your oh, Pam, that was helpful. I'm so glad to see you. You haven't said hi yet. Hey, Pam. So glad you're on. Are you watching during your break? Is that where you're at? So what I'm trying to show you is that when you have a petal over top of a leaf and you're painting the leaf second rather than first, you are actually creating the edges of the petals at the same time. So you just want to be aware of like what shape you're creating on each of these little petals, because you're drawing your leaf around them. So I'm going to kind of carefully sculpt each of those little petals like that as I'm filling in that leaf. I hope that makes sense. So same with this one here. I'm going to come back over here and make sure each of these little petals is shaped the way I want them to be shaped, because the leaf is coming out behind them and is going to be their background basically. I'm going to kind of break them up a little bit so they're not super stiff and perfect. Okay, so there's a couple leaves there. We want a leaf over in this direction somewhere. The reference photo has stems. I feel like stems are going to be too stiff here, so I'm not going to do a stem, but I think I'm going to do like a little leaf coming out this way and maybe just being sort of bent this way. And fill that in. I'm also using a pretty dark green because the flowers are so light, the background is so light, but the center of the flowers are so dark that it needs something deeper to balance it out. So I'm using a dark green and just going with that. I actually kind of like it just like that. Maybe I'll scoop up some of this green and just let the end be kind of broken up like that. Okay, so I'm cleaning my brush off. I'm trying to pick up a little bit of that dark green so that it doesn't come off so dark. So I'm using a dry brush and sweeping up some of that color so it's not super dark there. And feeling really good about that right there. I do want to leaf up on this side. I remember there was, let me see where it had it on the reference photo. Well, maybe there wasn't a leaf on that side. I think I want a leaf on this side somewhere, so I'm going to add one. Maybe right here, just a small one. And I'll just try to draw that in. I have no wet over here, so it's dry on wet, so I'm able to get a real crisp line. I'll just kind of go like this, I guess. One way to make your flower paintings look more realistic is to make some of your petals and some of your leaves look not great. Like make them look sort of bent or like they got snapped or squished or broken or something. Only a couple of them. Like, you know, you don't have to make your flowers look terrible. But if you do that, it'll look way more realistic because most flowers are not perfect. I just realized this entire time I've had this paintbrush just sitting across the front of my page. So yeah, sorry, this little brush is in the way. I guess it wanted to be used. Who knows? So I think that's as far as I want to go with the sunflowers themselves. Just that kind of abstract, not super perfect painting. But look how quickly you can just throw some color on the page and your eyes see the flower. Even though it's like, if you look at each individual petal, there's not really petals there. It's like blobs of color. But when you put the blobs in the right place, it looks like a flower to your eyeball. If you guys have seen me paint roses before, some of my favorite roses are like this little swirl and then just like a bunch of swirly blobs going around it. And when you're painting it, you're like, this really doesn't look like a flower. But then when you back up and you look at it, it's like, oh, that is a flower. And then you add some buds and stems and different things like that, and it does look like a flower. Okay, I'm taking out the edging paper. This is my favorite part, always. Taking the tape off is always my favorite part. It just is like instantly like, wow, painting. I'm going to take this part off as well, and you'll see what I mean by that. Created like a little frame there. We could put a Bible verse in. Okay, and then I'm going to take this edge off. Look how crisp and clean. Isn't it gorgeous? I love it's like when you paint a room and you pull the tape off the trim and you're like, oh, wow, it's amazing. Okay, there's the painting. Oh, I think that looks really good on camera too. Sometimes I paint something on here and I can't tell whether it looks nice to you guys, but this looks really good in person and on camera. I'm so excited. I want to write our scripture for today, which was, did I lose it? No, I did not. It's Luke 12:27, looks like. Yeah, 12:27. So I'm going to write this down. I'm gonna try not to write and smear my painting at the same time. I am taking the mask off. Daniel, you are so right. I totally am. The masking tape. That's what I'm taking off. Okay, so I'm gonna write this down, and as usual, this is the part of the show where Marina stops talking, because if Marina talks while she writes, she misspells words on live. So you guys talk amongst yourself and like tell me what your favorite flowers are, and I'm gonna write my verse down while I can get it here, as long as I don't smudge my painting while I'm at it. Okay. So we'll see how fast I can write. I'm just going to use, I'm still talking. I'm just a glutton for punishment. Still going to use my normal handwriting. But if you wanted to use something that was fancier, you could use a fun font. That would be fun. And I know these aren't lilies, but you know, it works. That's the verse. The verse says lilies. Okay. Oh, Tanya likes revealing the taped borders too. Yeah, it's so fun. It's like really satisfying. You can peel it off. Okay, almost done with this. You guys must just be having a watch party. All right, there it is. All right, so there's the scripture focus for today. I think that is what I'm going to leave you guys with. Oh, I do want to put the date on the edge. So Friday, May 28th. I'm going to turn my page sideways. I like this little sideways thingy. I started doing that on a lot of my journals. I think it's really fun. I'm going to just do kind of a block font. The block font looks like almost like an old scientific travel journal thingy. So May 28th. I'll try to get the date right today. One time I wrote 2020, and I wrote the wrong, I don't know, I fixed it wrong somehow. Tried to write 2000 something, then I fixed it to 2020, and then I had to eventually totally cover it up because it was wrong. So 2021, right? I think that's right. May 28th, 2021. Good. Awesome. Oh, protein. You guys are making me hungry. I need some Neolife protein. Just need some protein. Okay. All right. This is everything I have for you guys today. I will go ahead and do some more journaling in here and maybe put a header on it, but that's the basic page. And look how well that goes with the rest of the theme, all of this fun yellow and summery types of paintings, including bees and butterflies and all that fun stuff. But look how well that goes together, and see how this is the difference. If you wanted to know the difference between a border and no border, here's the one with the border, nice and crisp, and then here's one without. So it doesn't look bad, but it just, I don't know, it creates a more finished look. This one, I didn't do a border because there was all this going on, and all of this masked off was like enough to not need a border, but that border is so cool. So anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate the encouragement. And everyone else, you have a really blessed Friday and a happy, happy weekend. And I'll see you on the next live next Friday. Take care. Bye.